Hello everyone, it's Livia here, aka Story Minded, and I'm finally getting around to making another book recommendation video. It's been months since I've made my last video. I want to try and be better at updating my channel as much as possible, but life is busy and you know how it is. But I'm just going to sort of talk through what attracted me to this particular book and just sort of share some of my thoughts on it really. So this is The Familiars, written by Stacey, and sort of what attracted me to this book to begin with was obviously the name. I'm currently writing a historical fiction novel myself, set during the Elizabethan period, and I'm kind of playing with the idea of wise women and witches. So when I first saw this title, obviously Familiars being the animal spirits that they believed, witches during the Tudor period specifically, or throughout history, they believed that witches had these servants, these animal spirit servants that were kind of like the sign that they were in the workings with the devil, and they had these animal assistants helping them carry out all their evil plots and magic. So when I saw this title, I was drawn immediately to it, picked it up, turned it round and saw that it was set in 1612, which is the Jacobean period when King James I was on the throne in England. So immediately was drawn in and thought, I have to give this a read. Stacey plays with the genre of historical fiction in the sense that there's sort of different ways that you can write historical fiction. You can either have a completely fictional story set in a real historical time period, or you can actually take historical figures from real life and then obviously fictionalize them and their relationships and the interactions they have to create your story. And that's what Stacey's done. She has a whole host of wonderfully written characters who were actual people, but she plays around with there's no evidence that for the protagonist in this book that she ever met one of the Pendle Witches, which is kind of the premise of this book. So we have Fleetwood Shuttleworth, who we follow throughout the story, who is 17 years old. She's married and she's struggling to produce an heir for her husband. It's very harrowing, poignantly and beautifully written. This kind of drawing on themes of like womanhood and the struggle of trying to kind of that concept that if you're unable to do the kind of one thing that society of the time, historically speaking, expects of you, if you can't do that, then what is your purpose in life? Why do you even exist? Which is a lot for a 17-year-old to be dealing with. And it's during the time of the Pendle Witch Trials, which Fleetwood's husband Richard is a part of, because he's sort of a part of the courts, and their oldest friend Roger Knoll, who Stacey has written amazingly. He's a very irritating, power-hungry, corrupted character who starts off as a very close family friend, almost like a surrogate father figure to Richard, who is rapidly taken over by power and wanting to gain favour with his king, and is kind of going on his last hurrah before he retires and decides to get involved with the Pendle Witch Trials. And he is not below using a child to use her testimony to indict her entire family and accuse them of being of witches. Very manipulative, this poverty-stricken girl. He just manipulates and uses to condemn her entire family. Fleetwood eventually meets a character called Alice Gray, who in history she was the only woman, and there's no evidence or records to ever explain the reason why. So that's kind of what Stacey really plays with to create this wonderful novel. Alice Gray was the only woman to be acquitted during the Pendle Witch Trials, and no one knows the reason why she was spared, but it's just this wonderful tale is spun, and Alice becomes Fleetwood's midwife in the hopes that with her help she'll be able to produce an heir, to help her produce a successful birth and to hopefully survive. Because without giving too many spoilers away, one of the very first things you learn in this book is that Fleetwood discovers a secret letter written by her husband Richard to a doctor with his concerns, obviously about his wife and her, because by this point she's had, I think, up to, she's pregnant for the 4th time. Her previous 3 pregnancies have sadly not have not been viable, so she's had 3 miscarriages by this point, and she's just so desperate that this child will survive. And she discovers very early on that her husband has written a letter in secret to a doctor because he's worried about, whether it is ever going to happen. And this doctor essentially writes back and says, yeah, your wife, if she is going to go through with another pregnancy, don't hold out much hope. It's going to be a death sentence. She is going to die if she attempts to have another child, which is obviously horrifying because when she discovers this letter, she's already pregnant at this point. So to find this secret letter, and then there's much more scandal and other things you discover as you go through this novel. But I just really sort of wanted to recommend it because it's just so poignantly and beautifully written, and what I really enjoy is the kind of the family relationships and friendships that are portrayed in this book, and the tension, and just like the hatred and the way we get to see also Fleetwood's very distant relationship with her mother and how tense and taut it is, and then to see the kind of blossoming of her friendship with Alice. And it's also interesting how it follows or centers around a more sort of they're obviously wealthier characters. Like Alice comes from very humble beginnings in comparison to obviously Fleetwood, who her and her mother aren't necessarily highly well off, but she's obviously married up. She's married to Richard, and that Richard has kind of been able to also increase his wealth by marrying Fleetwood. So there's this whole kind of can't think of the right word, but like this kind of separation between statuses and how he holds more power because he's a man. But in a way, if it wasn't for Fleetwood, he wouldn't have gained the kind of wealth from Fleetwood's mother, who is now kind of living in faux wealth, where Richard is kind of tapping into family accounts and obviously garnering more wealth, and then leaving her mother back at Fleetwood's former childhood home, and she's having to buy things like tallow candles, which were candles that were made from fat, and they were obviously they were inexpensive compared to like beeswax candles. So it's just all these discrepancies, and how her mother is barely having any food, and yet Richard is throwing these like lavish feasts. So I highly recommend it, and I hope to make another video soon. Bye.